It's a landmark development for India's banking landscape. You have an insolvency and bankruptcy code. The RBI was trying to expedite 12 cases, two Bhushan Group companies on that, and Bhushan Steel will perhaps become the first such resolution under the insolvency and bankruptcy code. I want to discuss that in further detail, and we have a special guest, Sanjeev Sanyal, the Principal Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Sanyal, I saw your tweet over the weekend, a historic transaction that has been concluded successfully, the first one as such, the first big one under the insolvency and bankruptcy code. Now, there is a deadline that is looming large. Are you confident that you're going to see many more transactions happen in the near future, in the next few days, because there is a deadline in place as per that code?
Can I take the second?
Absolutely. We'll see a lot more of these transactions happening. But I'd like to put this in a wider historical context. As I said that till 1991, we had socialism without entry, in the sense that only those who could procure a license of some sort could become a serious businessman in this country. After 1991, we obviously got rid of the license permit Raj, but then you ended up with capitalism without exit. So now what we have done with this insolvency and bankruptcy code, which of course came out, it was put in place 2 years ago, but it took this much time for us to really see it work. And this is the first time that we have seen a very large company changing hands. As you know, Tata has paid some 36,000 crores for this Bhushan Steel plus 12% equity. But it is not just about the money. What it is about is putting in place a way in which real market-based economy based on creative destruction, entrepreneurship, real risk-taking will be put in place. So it is far more important than just a single transaction.
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. Do you see the success of the process getting more participation by other corporates who see value in these assets which are on the block? Is there good value for some of the assets that are on the block?
I think as a policymaker, I am not concerned by the specific transactions that happened. The key thing to remember is putting through a process by which this creative destruction will happen. Because this is absolutely critical, because otherwise you cannot have a risk-taking based system. You see, any economy that is based on innovation and risk-taking has to take into account the fact that things will go wrong occasionally. Now, what you cannot do is simply accumulate these mistakes. In order for a healthy market-based economy, you need a system by which those decisions, business risks that were taken that go wrong are continuously liquefied. So this is an absolutely critical part of having a healthy economy, particularly one that is based on innovation and risk-taking. So that is why it is important. Whether, whether a specific company changes hands or not is not of concern for the overall system.
Now, the problem is that if you look at the earnings season that we are in, there is clearly a lot of pain that is there, particularly with the public sector banks. Let's not even talk about right now the Nirav Modi scam and what's happened with Punjab National Bank. But there is an issue right now and a lot of pain that you see in private sector banks as well, with a lot of new issues that are cropping up. Do you see the NPA situation right now having bottomed out? That's what I'm asking you, because it seems every other day new skeletons are tumbling out of cupboards of private sector and public sector banks.
Now, for the banking sector specifically, what this does is this is a system of creating recovery, not just banks but creditors at large. Again, that there is, when something goes wrong, you can auction, liquidate, whatever it is, and get some or residual value back. In this specific case, of course, we have seen a huge amount of value coming back. Something over 90% of the principal amount of the outstanding with Bhushan Steel has been given back. Other instances you may get less or more, but the fact of the matter is that there is a process now in place. Now, as the banks begin to get this money back, what you will see, they can begin to write back these amounts. This is, again, go back a year back. This banking problem has been, as I said, been around for a long, long time. for years, in fact. And other attempts, for example, in the late 90s, early 2000s, there had been one round of sort of a cleanup. But again, it didn't change the culture. So you went back to doing the same mistakes. This time, we have changed something very fundamentally by carrying out this bankruptcy process. So a year back, we had thought that we would create a bad bank, we would stick all these bad assets there, and we would recapitalize the banks. But that would not have served any purpose, in the sense that you would have the banks, the culture would not have changed, the processes would not have changed, and so they would have been recapitalized and, not surprising, probably gone back to doing what they were doing before. And meanwhile, all these bad assets would have festered in a warehouse called a bad bank. And ultimately, what would have happened? They would either been spoilt or been probably bought back at very, very low valuations. Here, what we have is a much more robust system by which effectively the banks are able to sell these assets off and get the money back. This does two things. One, it forces the banks to account for the kinds of changes, losses that they have made, account it properly, so that they can, there is a culture change, i.e. the pain is genuinely felt. At the same time, when you carry out a proper sale, auction, liquidation, etc., some of the money comes back. So both sides of it are good, in that there's a culture change on one hand in the corporate sector, and also a culture change in the banking system, as well as a rational way of then liquefying the assets and getting back whatever residual value happened to be left of that asset.
Right. So let's just talk about Indian macros as well. Crude is playing a havoc on our macro once again. Now, how do you assess the situation? Is there a reason to worry at this point of time?
Yes, of course. We are a major oil importer, and we are dependent on imported crude. So, of course, as oil prices go up, it is of some concern to us. Obviously, the first place of impact is the current account. So there we will watch that very closely. While there is no reason to panic given how much large reserves we have, so we can pay for it for the time being. But nevertheless, it will ultimately, if crude prices remain at very high levels, it will feed through to oil prices here in India. It will feed through to our current account and so on. So there is some concern. But nonetheless, I mean, the rupee is still comfortable. We have reserves which are comfortable. And although some of this will ultimately feed through to inflation, at least the fuel part of it, it is also something that we look at quite closely. No reason to panic, but nevertheless a matter of concern.
Okay, so the first thing you're clearly watching out for is the current account deficit. In fact, we did see the Department of Economic Affairs Secretary talking about how the maximum impact could be up to $50 billion. The question, of course, is that can our economy afford that? Mr. Sanyal, always a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you so much for joining us here to talk about IBC. Clearly it is clearly a a landmark moment. But I just wanted to ask you once again before I let you go. Do you see factors, and you talked about how you're checking out current account. I believe we do have some time left for this interview. Look at the rupee. It's the worst performing currency in all of Asia at the moment. You got crude at all-time high. Consumers are complaining about taxation system, which makes petrol above 80 rupees also. Is there a fear that you might see interest rates going up, and would that be the right thing for India, especially when outflows would be accompanied by such a move?
Well, this is something that the RBI's Monetary Policy Committee has to take a view on. It's not in my place to tell them what to do. Certainly, worldwide interest rates have shown a sign of firming up. So, some impact may be there in India. But as I said, it is something I am not in a position to comment on.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking our time for us. Always good to get perspective from you, whether it's about macros, whether it's about IBC, or what's the latest that is happening in the economy. That was a view from Sanjeev Sanyal.